I'm about ready to do my thing. Hey, Mr. Bird, I'm about ready to go. We gonna go on three. Right, Mr. Elvis. Let me just motherfucker to the Presley. Ha The JB. What's up? The original JB. James Brown, the godfather of soul. But before we had the godfather of soul doing his thing, entertaining us, on the other side of the pond was the most popular human being on the planet, Elvis. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. So Elvis was out there doing his thing, jailhouse rock, before all the jailhouse rocks, and all of these different things that were transpiring. But it was Elvis country. Elvis always had a movie and an album, and everything was going Elvis. So now Elvis did what most artists do at that time. They would always have two different markets for the music. They would have the mainstream, which was normally Caucasian artists. It was very few African Americans that were allowed to be on the main circuit. And if they were on the main circuit, they were entangled in such a contract in which it didn't make any sense for them to even, be on a record deal such as the one they were on. Now, with that being said, we move forward. We have the underground circuit that had blues, they had jazz, they had all these soulful records that, if they were great enough and good enough, that the Caucasian upper popular mainstream market would take those songs and make them what they are today. They would take them and put them on the mainstream and have a Caucasian artist sing it, and that would be a popular song. And that person wouldn't even get the rights, basically. They would get like a flat fee. They wouldn't even get writer's credit for the song. So a lot of the underground artists knew they were basically what they call the Chitlin circuit, because some people actually performed in Chitlin houses in the South. Packed up, they selling chitlins in the back, and then they'll do a festival seating and have it all set up and do their show. They didn't want to be where everyone else frequent. You know what I'm saying? They didn't want to go to the mainstream. A lot of artists just didn't want to go through that. But some people wanted to go and strive to be the best. James wanted to go wherever the music was going to take him. James had a way he wanted the music to sound. He had a way he wanted the music to be played. He know what he wanted to hear. So when he hears it, he hears the drums, and he don't care if it's not musically synced up right, as long as it makes sense in his mind and the way he's hearing it. Bum, bum, You'd be like, man, this does not follow a structure. But it followed a structure in James' mind, and he followed the way it sound. It was different. The tempo was high. It was some energy. It was just electric. Then you hear that voice, and you hear the soul of James, and you hear James's flair, because he can make a high energy record, then slow it down and make a soft, tender record with that voice. Please, 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 don't let me go. Please, please, please. Mr. Please, 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 baby. Don't let me go. Then he would do his gospel records. And this would shock people that James could do this. But also doing rhythm and blues was across the pond, good old Elvis. Now, JB wasn't on his radar doing his thing. He was out performing and doing all of his, things in his early years. Elvis was gifted. Elvis had stage presence. He had the flair. He had the moves. He had the attitude. He was influenced by people who were in the, music that wasn't on the mainstream. He would sneak and listen to these records. Now everyone said, Mr. Whitman, can you please come on over and see Elvis? And at the performances, RCA decided to cut him a contract after watching him perform at the Bon Air Club. They were like, get on over here. We're going to sign you to a deal. See, that stuff didn't happen for African Americans, of course. But for Elvis, who was, because of the Public Enemy song and a lot of other things that happened, was known to be a stark racist. Wasn't necessarily true. I wouldn't say it's not all the way true, but it wasn't as true as you might think. Elvis was forced to be a racist. He grew up in a household that was very not diverse. He grew up in an area that wasn't diverse. He grew up in a record business that really wasn't diverse. And he was not somebody who really thought that way. But he knew not to upset the herd. He wasn't somebody that was going to go all the way out on the limb. But this is how Elvis and everybody else, what they did for the majority of his success. Blue Suede Shoes was a song that was created by someone else in the African American community. Hound Dog, Big Mama Thornton, the record did so well that Big Mama Thornton was able to, you know, actually be credited for the record because it was massive when she recorded it. So Hound Dog, another song that he ended up covering, but a lot of his songs came from the African American community. He was bringing them to the mainstream as Elvis songs, even the moves he was doing. He would have people go and tape performances so that he could learn the music, and Elvis would go and get his band to perform them to bring him to the mainstream. And they made a mistake because one day they were covering a man who had the world's attention by the name of JB and James Brown. They didn't even understand James's high energy records. Elvis couldn't do that. But what he wanted to do is his gospel songs. Elvis started performing gospel records and getting back to the church roots. Then Elvis started doing moves like James, trying to do his James Brown moves on stage. And it was more of a, I'm going to do this on the mainstream, and James was being blackballed by mainstream because he was not going to, even though he was signed to a major record deal, when James Brown took over and was his own artist, they would try to basically say, well, we're not going to play him on mainstream radio. He's too aggressive. James invented the word street team. See, that's what James was good at. James had a street team. And what James Brown would do is they would go around at city by city. They can go to the ghetto DJ who gonna be pumping it everywhere that James Brown is coming to town. People that's working the night shifts, they going to the rib shop. People going to get the tips. They putting the flyers up there. They putting flyers everywhere. James Brown is coming to town. And when you hear James Brown is coming to town, what that tell you? People going. And they would think they would mess up James's tickets in his house. And James' house be sold out, city to city, before he even get there. That's the way James was doing it. James knew the people would show up if they knew he was coming. And once everybody else started to see it, it wasn't just blacks. Whites loved his music too. So Elvis would rent a hall, right? And go in and try to copy James's music in a hall. And only his family and friends would be there to watch it and go down, see the performance and tell them what, they thought about it. That's where he would, try out his new music. Then he tried to borrow James Brown's band. He was like, "Oh, I'm going on tour. See if James Brown will loan me his band." And that's where James just, that was it. James is like, "My band, you can't borrow, you can't buy, you can't rent. My band. That's my band. That's James Brown's band. Listen, I'm finna go meet Elvis. Mr. Bird, set it up so I can meet Elvis. I'm about ready to do my thing." I mean, Elvis even did karate on stage like James. A lot of people didn't know James is very highly trained as a martial artist. He would tear somebody up. That's how he was so flexible and doing all that, those splits and everything. James is in shape. back then. James would tear you up. You ain't mess with James. Now, at this time, Elvis was in a slide. Elvis had came back from the war. He was a big movie star, hero, and all this stuff, but his music wasn't popping no more. He got married to Priscilla. He's trying to have the Elvis comeback. I need that comeback. I'm in a slump. People had moved on to other artists. So he just wanted to come out and be Elvis. So when he ran into Godfather Soul had to tell him a thing or two. And of course, he was scared to death. James had on a big long, he had a long doggone like mink coat, like made out of all fur. And he had on some black shades, and he walked up to Elvis with about 10, 20 brothers. Elvis was like, "Man, I'm a big fan of yours, Mr. Brown. I mean, your music, it's legendary. I just wanted to do, borrow your band and try to do something out there to tribute your show." So everything that he said was a lie. But James chilled with him, and after they kicked it, and some things happened that we'll talk about on the Patreon. And you know, they were buddies. They sitting over there singing gospel records together. Elvis was one of his boys, and he was like, so I can borrow your band now, right?" "No, nobody borrow my band. But I tell you what, I'll come on stage and perform with you." Yeah, we could do that. So they were gonna set it up where Elvis and James go on stage, and Elvis is gonna bring out James, or James gonna bring out Elvis. However, that was gonna happen. And right before it was gonna go down, it fell apart, and it wasn't because of Elvis, his people. And Elvis just told James in the hotel room, they're not gonna let it happen, James. They said if they put Elvis Presley on the stage with James Brown, that you just gonna make me look ridiculous, and then I'm gonna lose all my fans. They too scared to risk it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand up on that stage and I'm gonna tell them this here is dedicated to the greatest man in the country, James Brown. And Elvis did that. He stood up and he gave all the praise to James Brown. James had a ticket to the show. And he saw Elvis give him the proper respect on stage. Called him the Godfather Soul. And that's really what Elvis wanted. I mean, James wanted. He got the biggest artist in the world, Elvis, to recognize that he was the man. That's really what he wanted. And boy, were they buddies. And when he passed, man, he said that was a real one right there, Elvis. But see, Elvis wanted to be his own man. He just couldn't. You know, the people would not allow Elvis to be Elvis, the real Elvis Presley. He wanted to be diverse. Elvis wanted to be open, to new music and new. They wouldn't let Elvis be that. They was Elvis. We need you to just be Elvis. Sing out there, you're gonna lose it all. So Elvis don't want to lose it all. So Elvis just gonna toe the line. So when you don't want to lose things, that's always the scenario. Uh-oh. What is this? I always get something sent to me right now when I'm talking. But yeah, you'll learn some, behind the scenes stuff to this on the Patreon. We kind of like get it quickly, got quick to the point. So who was your favorite artist? Elvis or JB? But hopefully this puts some clarification on James and Elvis. Elvis, because when Public Enemy made the song, they just basically ended Elvis's whole thing. Elvis was a straight up racist. He was, but you know, it's the fear of being who you really are. He didn't want to be. And that's the end of that. Don't forget you could donate to the page by hitting up the Cash App. Carcino's the name. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. People that's finna make my day a living hell. You ever get some crazy bill collector calling about a bill from like 1992? Hi, you had a speeding ticket, I think, in 92 in some town, and it's $30. I'll be like, $30? Yeah, just pay the 30. I'm not paying the $30. I don't remember 1992. Oh, man. Anyway, I'm getting out of here. This has been long enough. Thank you for your time. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the page, all those wonderful things. And the Casino for Life link is in the description box. We out.